Oi oi, it's your boy, the Fire MMA Clips of Doing Ironic Bits, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on Monday the 5th of September, following an event in Paris, which I forgot what was in Paris, and then I turned on the Twitter. No, I got on Twitter, and people were talking about a fight that was going on at the time, and I went, oh Jesus, turned on the TV, came in about a round into Nathaniel Wood versus Charles Jourdain, and it was all pretty good. Sitting down today with a croissant, celebrating all things French. Croissant o'clock has always been the best time to watch fights. Sadly, French fights still happen about English time. It's Japan that has fights on a Sunday morning. Mind you, Risen's just said that they're going to do an event in Hawaii, which will be a reasonable time for nobody. Just brilliant Rising logic. Not only are they paying Floyd Mayweather to fight Mikuru Asakura, which nobody cares about, they made it almost impossible to buy or view their shows outside of Japan, and then they were like, we're going to do a Hawaii show. Of course, Floyd Mayweather's going to help us with it. And you go, what the fuck has Floyd got to do with Hawaii? The whole Rising thing is just now a scheme to pump money to Floyd Mayweather. But anyway, yeah, this was the first time in France for the UFC, despite the ban on MMA being the legalization of MMA being almost 2 years old now, or there's almost 2-year anniversary of that. It was, I think, mid to late 2020 they legalized it, which was obviously not a great time for anyone to be doing anything. But it was getting a bit absurd that they had 2 of the top 5 heavyweights in the world and the heavyweight champion, and they were still pretending that this was an awful sport that should never be allowed to happen. But France has got all kinds of weird rules about combat sports. The whole, you have to wear elbow pads to compete in Muay Thai. But they have always had a lot of martial arts talent on the ground. Some great gyms out there. There's great Muay Thai gyms. There's great grappling gyms. You've got luta livre gyms. You've got MMA gyms that aren't the MMA factory. You got the Fight Factory Paris, whatever it's called. You got a lot of guys there just waiting to start popping off. And now that they can actually have an effective regional scene, and that the UFC's been to town and inspired some people, that can only be good. But respect to Bellator, because they went there. Was that earlier this year or late last year? But they've already been. So the fights. Ciryl Gane versus Tuivasa, your main event. Tuivasa, to my mind, has always been a meme fighter. I got bored of the shoey after the second time he did it. But, heavyweight's bad, and he kept knocking out crap heavyweights, and then he knocked out 5 in a row, including Derek Lewis, who is the crap heavyweight who's also sort of the bottom of the top 5. So it was, undeniable that he was due a really good opponent. But as I said after the fight on Twitter, this was a really courageous performance. He was out-skilled, athleticismed, and we can get a lot out of him dropping Ciryl Gane once if you really want to, but for me it was just that he stood up to a pretty horrendous beating through the third round, and he took some big shots through the first and second as well. Gane, I don't know, he looked a little bit smaller to me, to my eye. Weighed in significantly lighter than Tuivasa, but Tuivasa's carrying a lot of extra weight that isn't, what is they always say, contractile tissue. It's not useful. But right from the get-go, I was a little bit a little bit concerned by the fact that Ciryl Gane was just dancing himself onto the fence. I believe they were using the big octagon for this one because the small octagon, I think, just stays up at the apex now. Gane spent a lot of that first and second round chilling near the edge of the cage, which is probably not where you want to be against a guy whose whole path to victory in this fight is to burst in on you and hit you with a good shot when you don't have space to retreat or move offline. But he established the jab early, and it really did become a huge part of that game plan. It's kind of crazy because he didn't have one really early in his MMA career. He's only 4 years into his MMA career, but it turned up about 3 or 4 fights in, and it's just been one of the best jabs it's probably the best jab in the heavyweight division, and he can do it off both stances. Because he's got an 83, 84-inch reach or whatever it is, and he could just pop people's eye from halfway across the cage. And Tuivasa, couldn't get his head out of the way, couldn't parry it. And by round 2 and 3 was just trying to mean mug through it, which, smiling and going, yeah, go on then, and proving you can take the shot is not really helping you with a jab, because the point of a jab isn't to knock you out. The point of the jab is to just build up damage. If you take enough jabs, you're going to get woozy and you're going to slow down, but it's tiring to get hit a lot, especially when you're trying to react to it. Things start sneaking through after it because it closes, it blinds you momentarily, and it also, because he's popping you in the eye, it closes your eye, and you find it harder to see other shots coming behind it. But I think we said on the pre-fight show, hitting the body, big path for Ciryl Gane. The front kicks to the body, the round kicks off the rear leg to the body when he's southpaw, or open guard with his opponent. If he's against a southpaw, he'll switch to orthodox to throw the right kick to the body. But I think it was about round 2, he sent in a good one, and Tai Tuivasa bent over and folded his arms over his belly, which is always something you don't want to do. He's supposed to try, but he poker faced the jab well, but he could not hide the fact that he was not taking the body shots well. And of course, the third round was just Ciryl Gane landing body kick after body kick, and Tai Tuivasa looking like he wanted to throw up every time, and then trying to stand back up into his stance and getting kicked again in the body. The way Gane got caught actually wasn't too much to do with the footwork that I was talking about earlier, the getting caught along the fence. He was near the fence, but it wasn't it wasn't part of the exchange. It didn't look like. He came in for, I think, a jab or something like that. Tai Tuivasa threw back a left hook that clacked him on the shoulder, and he extended his lead hand over Tai's shoulder in a leverage guard. And he had his other hand up nice and high, so he had a good frame to a nice long guard, and he started moving back, and Tai Tuivasa shot a right straight that just skidded down the middle between the forearm and the shoulder. Very small gap he got through. Really just a good shot from Tuivasa. But through the first round, you saw him trying to walk Gane to the fence, which I thought was really good. That's probably what you want to do. If you've got the height and reach disadvantage, put him to the fence, because then you've got a much better chance of chinning him when you can take away the ability to move backwards. If there's a significant height and reach disadvantage and there's no boundary, if you just fought in an infinite plane, you'd never get close unless the other guy made a mistake. I think there's too much in MMA. People don't realize that the boundary is your best friend if you're trying to get inside someone's reach. And that's true in boxing, and in kickboxing too. But we're going to get into that with Joaquin Buckley, because that was an extremely frustrating fight from both sides. But what else to say about this fight? Great high kick that, because he was kicking the body and he was hurting Tuivasa so much that you're going, well, he's going to turn that over to the head soon. And he clacked him with a clean head kick that made Tuivasa sort of, do a little wobble. But it was that Mark Hunt chin. He's Mark Hunt's protege, and he somehow picked up some of his chin. Just incredible to be able to take a flush head kick from a guy that size and keep going. Even though it was sort of the beginning of the end, it was still, he took a hell of a beating to get out of there. I think one of the problems that Tuivasa was always going to have in this fight was a lack of weapons. Doesn't really have, because Gane always had the takedown threat. He has lovely knees on the inside, which he doesn't really use enough, but he used them well in this fight. When he got dropped, he immediately ducked into a clinch, and he could threaten the takedown. He could attempt a knee. He could try and trip him. He had a lot of options, whereas Tuivasa, he caught Gane in the second by surprise. But once you've seen that once, that's really all he's going to do. That and the low kicks. And Gane did a decent job of just pulling away from those, retracting his leg back into his stance, and letting them fly by. And of course, then the thing about everyone wants to check a kick, which has been a big problem for low kicks because it's quite difficult to do it without changing the way you check. But everyone wants to pick their leg up and point the shin out into the kick and hurt the person who's trying to kick them, hoping that makes them not kick again because it hurts. Or, maybe you get a freak leg snap and you go viral, which has led to this massive undervaluing of just retracting your leg. Because if you retract your leg underneath you, which is obviously one of the main defenses in Muay Thai, you'll see them used almost equally. Because if the guy kicks at you hard and you pull your leg back, he's going to kick through the target. He's going to turn away from you, and he's going to give you an angle to get back in with a kick or a punch or a takedown attempt to capitalize on him being out of position. And if you let guys miss a couple of times, the effect is pretty much the same as if you landed a really good check. Landed a check. Look at me justifying Sean O'Malley beating Pedro Munoz. But if you score a good check on against someone's kick, the effect is going to be the same as if you pull away from their kick a couple of times and they get out of position and you threaten to blast them when they're out of position. So Gane did a really good job of that, letting Tai Tuivasa kick past him, and then Tuivasa pretty much gave up on the low kick. But in terms of notable moments, that was basically all I got from the main event. It was a fun fight. If you haven't seen it, go watch it, because certainly for heavyweights too, rare to get such a fun fight out of them. And Gane takes a fantastic shot as well, because he took a really good one from Tuivasa and recovered very quickly, did smart things while he was hurt, which is always a good sign. Because as we were talking about last week, it's very well praising someone for how well they fight when they're hurt, because that's an art form in itself. But if you're really hurt, it's almost impossible to remember what you're supposed to be doing. But yeah, I had a suspicion that Gane's chin was pretty good all along, even though he's not been hit very well, because he used to train with Ngannou. It was just the two of them taking lumps out of each other at Fight Factory Paris or whatever it is. So your co-main was Robert Whittaker versus Marvin Vettori, and man, I came into this one thinking maybe Vettori surprises me here, because he's got sort of a rounded skill set. His problems are just that he doesn't really have power in his strikes. He's kind of in the Paulo Costa situation, where he's a strong guy who I think if you take some shots from him, you're going to feel it in the morning, but he doesn't really have the snap on his punches that causes that, that wobbling of the legs, the disorientation. He's sort of like a clubbing hitter. Because, he fought Jack Hermansson, and Jack Hermansson very clearly didn't like getting hit by him. And when Jack Hermansson doesn't like getting hit by someone, he immediately, his whole game plan falls apart. But I don't think he was ever at risk of knocking Hermansson out. He was billed as a kickboxer, and basically he's surprised in MMA by being a good wrestler with some good striking on top of it. Or a decent wrestler, at least, in a division where there aren't really any wrestlers. However, he is a southpaw. He's got a decent left-hand counter as a southpaw, so I thought, that could be tricky against Whittaker. And Whittaker bamboozled him. One judge gave Vettori the first. I'm going to say that judge is a moron. I had a couple of people telling me, no, it was pretty close the first. You could have called it for Vettori. No, Vettori landed a couple of body kicks and a left straight at one point that Michael Bisping was like, he's landed that a lot, and he wasn't. But, yeah, the strike differential was lower in the first round, but that's because the second and third round, Vettori did nothing. There was not a minute of this fight that I think he won. I don't think he looked threatening at any point. It was another Whittaker clinic. If we're giving out props for chins, Vettori, fantastic. Because there was some criticism after this, Whittaker's a decision fight or whatever, and he said in the post-fight interview, yeah, I know I've got a lot of decisions, but I do hit hard. And you can see, when he's hitting people, he's cracking them. Stumbled Marvin a couple of times with a head kick and a right straight. But we know that Vettori's got a great chin. I think Whittaker could fight in a way which was more conducive to getting stoppages, because he's not exceptionally high output. He is point fighting. He's reduced it to exchanges of 1 and 2 punches to set up maybe a 1-2 high kick or something like that later on. And he keeps what the opponent can do to him at a minimum. Obviously, he's had some amazing wars, like the two against Yoel Romero, but he's fighting clever, and he's making the most of his talents. Scored a great takedown. Was it in the third? That Andre Galvao head in the chest, double leg, which, believe me, you're going to see him attempt it at ADCC in a few weeks. Vettori, it's him and Rafael Cordeiro. They come in with bad game plans, man. And in the third round, he decided to go for broke by double jabbing and then try to do a along the fence double leg. The same thing that he did 100 times against Israel Adesanya in their second fight, to no effect. Big strong guy, very, very silly game plans. In terms of an answer for Whittaker, because he's done this same thing to Till, Gastelum, Cannonier, and now Vettori. Great resume as far as middleweight goes. But he basically did the same thing in all 4 of those fights, with little changes here and there. Basically, when did he shoot the takedown? Or did he shoot the takedown? But one of the ways to deal with it is he does a lot of shooting jabs and then coming chest to chest, or shooting a 1-2 and coming chest to chest. And that's part of that karate boxing we talk about a lot. One of the ways to stop someone getting back at you on the counter is to crash in chest to chest and then shove them away or whatever. But a lot of the time in this one, he was coming chest to chest with Vettori, and Vettori wouldn't back away, or wouldn't let Rob push him back. And then Rob would do a big duck out the side door. And those are the ones that can get you, one-punched, basically. I'm always thinking about the Kyoji Horiguchi versus Sergio Pettis, but what was it, a back fist? Yeah, it was a back fist. Landed because Horiguchi was reliably stepping out to the side and really going for it, moving fast and throwing his head out as he did it. And Whittaker was doing the same sort of thing here. If you watched his fights with Yo Romero, he kept coming in with was it a 1-2, and then stepping off to his left, and then Romero timed him with a left hook coming out to his left. Stepping off. Whittaker would step off to his right, and basically Romero almost took his head off with a left hook in the later rounds. So that's one way to slow him down. Use the clinch a bit more too. If you can hold him there after he comes in to collide with you. Cornering him, because I thought Vettori was doing a decent job of walking him towards the cage in the first round, and then he sort of lost it as the fight went on. And obviously, you get distracted by getting jabbed in the face a lot. And a couple of his reactions also let him off, or let Whittaker off the hook here, because Vettori, when he got stung with things, it was very strange, because he walked down Paulo Costa and just had a slugfest with him. But Whittaker would catch him with a good jab in the eye or a good kick in the body, and Marvin would take 2 steps back and then start over on trying to cut the ring. Also, very little leg kicking. You gotta, if you're dealing with someone with 1, a bladed stance, 2, an in and out style and a lot of movement, one way to slow him down is to kick the legs, and also a way to get in on good punches, because they're in a bladed stance. If you hit them in the leg when they're light on it, it'll move across them, and you can get in. It's the same as if they missed a kick. You've got that slight angle, you've got them out of position, you've got a good chance. So what else did I enjoy on this card? Let's talk about Nathaniel Wood, because this lad is... I thought he'd sort of become as much as he was going to become. Back when he's fighting like John Dodson, John Castaneda, I was like, oh, okay, cool, this guy is like a stepping right hand, can bang a bit, yeah, cool. And since coming back at bantamweight against Charles Rosa and Charles Jourdain, took 2 years off, I think due to injuries and things.
Bruh.
Editor's note. Jack Slack here says bantamweight multiple times, and in fact means featherweight. And also just, the global pandemic, which I keep forgetting happened. But, yeah, he's been such a breath of fresh air in his last one and this one. 2 cards where he just stood out as the most interesting technical talent on there for me. The variety was showing. He's an interesting guy because he's the protege of Brad Pickett. And Brad Pickett, if you didn't watch WEC back in the day, you probably only know him for getting knocked out lots, because towards the end of his career, Brad Pickett was taking some beatings. It was, not a graceful way to go out. But Brad Pickett, his nickname was One Punch, so you expected a big banger from him, but apparently that nickname was sort of a distraction, a ploy, because what Brad Pickett was really good at was wrestling. And obviously that's unusual for a British fighter anyway. If you watch his first fight with Demetrius Johnson, basically MMA wrestles him. I say first fight, actually DJ never got to avenge that, because they ended up in sort of very different places. But it is very interesting, because it makes you... we talk about this a lot, but wrestling is a great base to get into MMA. I think it gives you a lot of advantages. But wrestling in MMA is so different to wrestling in wrestling that aside from that leg up, it's not really a given that you're going to be great at it, or even at scoring takedowns in an MMA context. Because for a start, you have to start standing up, but you have to start standing up ready to take kicks and punches and avoid kicks and punches. If you watch a wrestling match, obviously, freestyle, folk style, not Greco, but it's all bent over at the waist. The head is the first line of defense. Well, the hands and the head. It's all getting underneath someone's stance and getting to their hips, or snapping them down. In MMA, obviously, you're starting from a striking position, so the setups are completely different. You're having to come from higher up to begin with. You're not trying to match your opponent's head level or get beneath their head level. You can't put your hands on them and pull them around to set up your takedown attempts from your usual range. You need to get to like a clinch to do that. And then once you get to a clinch, it's a striking clinch. It's not a pure grappling clinch. And so many of the guys who are doing well with their elbows and knees now are opening up easier trips and things as a result. We're always talking about Marlon Vera, Matt Brown, people like that, Leon Edwards. But in this one and in his last one, Nathaniel Wood's clinch looked fantastic. He was doing a lot of very close sort of infighting, putting his guard up very high and doing little boxing combinations, and then grabbing a collar tie and hitting an elbow, or holding a collar tie and hammering home some uppercuts. And it had the really interesting effect of making Jourdain stand up straight. And then he could hit this, I suppose you'd call it a kosotogare, a small outer reap. But that, where you're basically doing like a little axe kick, you're using your back heel on the opponent's leg. So you're not going to cross yourself like the Piotr Jan Osotogari or the Zabit Osotogari. You're doing the same side with your leg, and you're just going heel behind theirs and pulling their leg out and pushing them over it. And the success he had with that trip in this fight was incredible. And I don't think it would have happened if he weren't striking so effectively from that close range. He had another little move that I really liked, which was from these little close range combinations with his peekaboo type guard. He'd step back from almost an upright stance, so his feet are very close together. He'd step back into a long stance and pull his head back and hit a pull counter from basically chest to chest. So he'd take a big step, lean back, the opponent would swing Jourdain would be swinging a left hook or something. It would go past him in front of him and he'd come back with the right hand. It was really nice. He did it a couple of times through the second and third round. Kept using the takedowns, getting top position. Didn't do an awful lot with top position, but scored his points. He took some body shots in the second that I thought slowed him down a lot, but then it looked like he was using a variance of tempo, which is something we always praise as a good thing. But when you see it in a fight after a guy's immediately been immediately after a guy's been body shot, you go, oh, well, he's gassing out. But he'd throw some slower punches on the inside, and then he'd do his pull counter at full speed, just come back with a wicked fast right hand. And it's long been the secret of big knockout artists and master boxers that you don't want to throw everything at 100% speed. You want to throw some stuff at 80, 70% speed, so that when you throw the 100% speed, you catch the guy off rhythm. I thought one of the things that let Jourdain down in this fight was when he got taken down to close guard, he spent a great deal of time sitting up and threatening the guillotine, which we know he has a great guillotine because he guillotined, who was it? It was one before last. Oh, it was Lando. Yeah, he guillotined Lando in the first round with a beautiful, almost one-handed because he wrapped his hand so deep. But from the closed guard, the thing with the guillotine is that it's not a submission that you can power through, or power on rather. You have to get the guy's neck. And if he's shrugging his shoulders in your closed guard and you can't actually wrap all the way around, you can't get it. So you have to try and distract them. You have to try and do sit-ups and things. The Ricardo Lamas one is a great example. He guillotined Charles Oliveira by using that sort of sit-up, over the back, get the fuck up guard, I call it, and butterfly sweeps and trying to stand up. And every time he tried to stand up, Charles Oliveira would plow back into him with his head out, with his chin not tucked, with his head up in the air. And then he'd grab the guillotine and roll over and finished him. But yeah, Jourdain spent a long time getting up on one elbow and looking for guillotines that just weren't there in this fight. And the other thing was that when he was in closed guard, I mean, this was partly just Wood holding him down, but he was never really able to pummel his legs to the inside. So that first bit in the closed guard in the first round, he spent the whole time sitting up on his elbow, trying to get the guillotine and scooting slowly backwards towards the fence. And then when he got to the fence, he was able to turn to his knees and stand up. But he got taken down into butterfly guard in the second or third round, and he was immediately able to throw his arm over the head and go to the turtle and stand up out in the open. Had he been able to pummel his legs inside from that closed guard, he probably could have made something happen sooner. It's just this thing we're always talking about with bottom play generally. If you're not getting up, you're losing. You've got to make something happen. And if the threat of the guillotine isn't enough for them to overreact, the threat of the guillotine was just making Wood hunker down and sit on him more. It wasn't providing him openings to get up. We're always talking about Charles Oliveira's armbar because he throws it up like a wild man, and he's never, ever, ever caught someone with his armbar and finished them. But what happens is that it makes stuff happen, and then he can get out or continue attacking in a chain. And I think that's the use of submissions. I think Andre Galvao wrote that in his what was his book called? Drill to Win. He said he never really worried about guys who were good at sweeps because he only ever got swept if he was scared of getting submitted. So you've got to have the threat there to create positional changes. But if it's a submission like a guillotine where the guy is just going to hunker down on you when you're showing it to him, not great. And to contrast it with the Lamas thing, or even Cub Swanson, someone like that, getting up and getting the over, they'd use that getting up on one elbow, grip over the back instead of trying to get the neck when they realised they couldn't get the neck, and then they'd force a knee shield through and start pummeling to like that reverse knee shield, get the fuck up guard position. What else was good? Oh, the right front kick from Nathaniel Wood. I saw this in his last fight too, but he lands so many of them. And the thing about a good front kick to the body is that commentators don't seem to comment on it. That's their job, commentating. But they don't seem to mention it. And when you spot them going in and they're not being answered, and the other guy's not reacting, you know that it's going to be a bigger issue than it is. You know that it's going to be a bigger issue down the road because you can't take free front kicks to the body. They don't look like much, but they very quickly become a big deal. I think Jourdain could have done better with more bodywork from early on. I thought he really surprised Nathaniel Wood with the first bit of bodywork in the clinch, or heading to the clinch in that close range stuff. I think the Nathaniel Wood experiment is still in an interesting place because, like I said, he's a very fast striker who's going up in weight, so that sometimes works out really well, like Robert Whittaker. But Robert Whittaker's been tested by some very good wrestlers for that weight class and showed that he's been working on his wrestling so hard that he's legitimately one of the better wrestlers in that weight class in his own right. Nathaniel Wood has only met a couple of... Rose is more like just a hard-nosed all-rounder who isn't that great. And Charles Jourdain is very much a striker. So, yeah, we really need to see what he can do when he's clearly the smaller man against a big wrestler. But at the moment, I'm really excited about his future. I don't know, bantamweight is such a strong weight class to come in with the disadvantage of already being one of the smallest men in the division. It's hard, but I don't expect him to run to the title and just win it outright. But I'm certainly keeping an eye on him as a possible, top 10 sort of guy, if he can keep it going like he is. There's my half hour of praise for Nathaniel Wood gone. Right, so other interesting stuff on this card. This Imavov versus Buckley fight, which I said I was looking forward to. I thought it'd be a fun one. But it was very frustrating because Hakeem Buckley was only doing the same thing over and over again, which is throwing 8 punches on a line. And Imavov was still getting into trouble because he has this horrible habit of going straight back. He's just going straight back on a line, and because he's so tall for that weight class, he can clearly get away with it. But, I was tweeting at the time, I don't like that, It's one of those things where Buckley's strategy wouldn't have any success if Imavov had good ring craft. But Imavov doesn't have good ring craft, so he might as well throw 8 punches in a row and just try and charge him down. And then he did, successfully at a couple of points, charge him onto the fence and hit him clean, as Imavov was sort of trying to grab a hold of him or move his head or whatever. So for the most part, it's that difference between distance control and ring craft. Because, again, if this fight took place on an infinite plane, Imavov wouldn't have got caught at any point. He's comfortable fading away, moving backwards, letting this guy fall short. But the moment that you put a boundary in there, he runs back onto it, and he doesn't have anywhere else to run. The other guy's going to catch up to him and hit him in the head. Buckley looked as limited as usual. He's a very exciting fighter, but he won't throw a fucking low kick, which is a huge part of why he's struggling to get in on these taller guys anyway. He won't cut to welterweight, even though he keeps mentioning it and then not doing it. He's been blacklisted from loads of gyms, so I don't suspect he's the easiest person to work with as a coach. He is what he is. He's going to try and do exciting things. He's going to pick up a couple of cool knockouts for every couple of losses he gets, but he's never going to make it to the top of that division because he's so small in it and he's so short and stocky, and he doesn't have the technical parts to make up for that. He's not cornering people well. He's not using low kicks and longer weapons to try and get some points in while he's building to a blitz or a rush or whatever you want to call it. Meanwhile, Imavov, all the stuff that I like is still there. I love the front foot front snap kick that him and Ciryl Gane both do, same team, but clearly this is something they're coached in. When they're using their front leg to front kick, the front snappy kick, against an opponent who's in the opposite stance, so southpaw versus orthodox or orthodox versus southpaw, they don't throw it straight. They throw it inside to out, like the inside out kick that Anderson Silva made famous. Luke Rockhold did it to the body against Paulo Costa and made him back up. And there was a great knockdown in, I think it was Rise or Crush, one of the J kicker orgs the other day. Someone got knocked down with it, which was awesome. It's a trick kick more than anything. But by making it just sort of an angled front kick to the body, it's quite interesting because in a southpaw versus orthodox situation, a lot of guys are going to stand more bladed anyway. That's just how that works. That's just the dynamic of that matchup. So you're picking it up and you're throwing it sort of outwards in a line with their belly button and center line, as opposed to straight at them where it could glide off them or slide off them, down the line of their body as they're bladed to you. I'm going to start playing with it myself because it's a very cool kick, and it's Front snap kicking with your lead leg straight is quite tricky. It's quite hard on the muscles. It's much easier to throw a good push kick with your lead leg. But I think by snapping it out, whipping it out like that, you can probably get a bit more snap on it. He says, I'm going to try it. We'll see. But it is a very noticeable trait of both Imavov and Ciryl Gane, and it's clearly something that they are being coached in at that gym. There were some nice drop-away open-side counters where he let Buckley fall short and threw his Buckley's right hand fall short and he threw his left hand over the top, or the other way around. I can't remember which one was the southpaw and which one was the orthodox. It's a good counter. He was getting very close with it. Could have caused some real damage. But again, this guy's 6'3". Buckley's what? I don't know, like 5'10", 5'11". And he's still really, he's at an extreme of height and reach advantage in this division. And it was still cutting it far too fine on a lot of these exchanges and getting caught a lot too. So I am hyped for Imavov, but I am also aware that he is making some big mistakes there, letting Buckley get into a fight like that. Kopylov versus Ciryl was rough. I was slagging this off at the time on Twitter, but honestly, I watched it again, and Kopilov's hands, I noticed this against Jourdain, but they're deceptively quick. I mean, he's an interesting guy because he's got something like an 88% knockout rate. It's going to be higher now, I imagine. He's got something like a 90% knockout rate, which is Melvin Imavov-esque, is how I described it. Or over him. Hard to do. But he also fought a lot of bums on the regional scene, and then he ended up fighting Duraev, and who was the other one he had a lot of trouble with? But he's had 2 fights in the UFC, 2 losses. So it was a case of well, was this guy just padded up? But his hands look quick. He just doesn't do anything defensively. He doesn't move his fucking head. So there was this weird situation where Ciryl is swinging wide on every punch. But then every time that he tries to throw a right straight, he goes about 4 inches through Kopilov's head and knocks it back. And then he forgets and goes back to throwing 8 or 9 overhands around. It was agony to watch. And then he went to his corner between the second and third, and they were just shouting, high kick, high kick, high kick. They didn't say, you landed the right straight really well a couple of times there, throw it straight down the pipe. They just gave him the worst advice I've ever heard. And then he went out and didn't even follow that. He was just swinging wide again. Meanwhile, Kopylov, respect to him. He's been working on himself. He's still defensively very porous, but his hands are pretty nippy. And he'd been working hard on his wrestling. And when Ciryl tried to get him down in the sort of throngs of desperation, he didn't. So, yeah, good for Kopylov. He's not a very good fighter. I don't expect him to go very far, but he's an interesting guy to have around. On the subject of fights I was slagging off, Aarons versus Gomez. Fucking William Gomez, the Frenchman in this matchup, turned up and did the Mark Jacasey thing. He said, I'm a wrestler in front of a home crowd. So he took him down lots and didn't hit him at all on the ground. Didn't try to hit him. I have respect for people who are trying to hit people and just aren't landing good blows, because at least you're looking busy. But John Aarons, they kept telling us he had a brown belt in judo, blah, 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 was awful off his back. Then he didn't look very good on his feet either. And then 2 times in this fight, he hit sick judo trips. Or he hit a nice, like a rice bale reversal. And then he ended up on top. And he looked like, I don't know what to do here. And immediately got wrestled down to the bottom again from top position. And then later he hit a judo throw and then rolled through into bottom position again. It was absolutely bizarre. Someone said that that's just the summary of what's wrong with judo nowadays. You learn to throw people and then you end up on the bottom as a result from doing your sick ippon. And you don't know how to get up from there. Really bad fight. William Gomez, only really funny because Jono Aarons threw up a triangle in the last round and almost finished Gomez after 2.5 rounds of Gomez sitting on top of him doing nothing. Anything else interesting? Magomedov knocked out Stoltzfus with a front kick to the face off the bat. Everyone's got to be going for these now, because if you don't score a front kick to the face and knock him out, you can immediately do the double leg like, what's my boy's name? Jailton Almeida, that's the one. Or even fucking Khamzat. Khamzat, 3 of his fights out of, 11? He's come out and thrown a kick to the head and immediately ducked in on the legs. It's just a set piece. Doesn't matter who he's fighting. He just does it. And it almost always works. But yeah, Magomedov hit him with a front kick to the face, swarmed in on him, hit him with an uppercut again, and got a very quick knockout. Haqparast versus Makdessi was fine. Haqparast has the weirdest corner in the world, where you've got super methodical and safe tri-stars for Sahabi and Rafael Cordero, who's fighters mainly just sort of swing wild. But yeah, I mean, he beat an old hand and a defensively very slick old hand in John McDacey, or a lot of the time defensively slick. Xian versus Figlak was good. Xian being the kickboxer, but just wrestled him to death. There was a great moment where he picked him up in the third round off the fence and was carrying him in the air, and Figlak was kicking, flailing as he was being thrown through the air and then dumped to the mat. And as they changed camera angle, a feather floated in from the top of the screen down onto the mat. It was really bizarre that happened. Benoit Saint-Denis got his win over Gabriel Miranda basically by tiring him out and beating him up. Yeah, it was all right. Benoit Denis, only really notable for the weird Templar tattoo he has on his chest. And then some stuff happened in the prelims, which wasn't very interesting. But yeah, not a bad card, I thought. And always a treat to watch it on Saturday night rather than Sunday morning when everyone's already talking about it. And I go on Twitter and I know what's happened in most of the fights. So next week we got Diaz versus Khamzat, which they were desperately trying to hype, even though everyone knows what's up and what's supposed to happen there. They should just be playing into the fact that, like, the promotion hates Nate Diaz and they want him to lose. They should just be playing into that. Because what do you lose? You know, if everyone goes, oh, that's bullshit, I'm rooting for Nate Diaz, and then they pay you money to watch it anyway. But, you know, they've got to do that like, oh, he's a dog, you know, oh, he's still one of the best things, even though he's never done anything at welterweight. But anyway, I am off to finish Alex Pereira Advanced Striking 2.0. I'm going to get that out hopefully today or tomorrow. If you want to get that and the Boycast this week and Boycast every other week, sign up to Patreon, support the podcast, be a boy. If you want to send an email to the podcast, which I'll answer some on the Patreon and on next week's episode, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack, not doing a shoey, bless.